Thank you guys for joining us for our very first Back to Basics workshop on what climate change is. The aim for this is to just look at these really big concepts and break them down just so they're easier to understand and easier to digest, and also very easy to tell the next person who might ask you what climate change is. Because a lot of the times in this space, we tend to just speak on what climate change is and we never really break it down. And so this is what we're trying to do here. So thank you all for joining us. We are very, very excited. My name is Michelle. Let me just switch on my camera for those who may not have seen my face. This is my pretty face. Hello, guys. Hi. I'm Michelle, and I'm going to be one of the facilitators for this session. We're going to be breaking down most things climate change, what it really means, what some really big terms mean, and some not really so big terms, but they still need breaking down. And then I'm going to give the mic to Xoli.
Thank you, Michelle. So my name is Xoli, and as Michelle has shared, that we really want to take today to break down these big concepts, around what is climate change. So, so maybe for some of you guys that have been exposed to this concept, or maybe was just like curious to come to our workshop today. So I just want to invite you to really go back to zero. Like, imagine that this concept is very new. You've never heard about climate change. So we might say things that might sound a bit silly or stupid, but just know that like we're really trying to break things down to the basics so that, somebody who doesn't have that background knowledge might be able to share this information with someone else who wants to know what is climate change. Yeah. And before we really dive in, so there are some terminologies that we're going to be talking about, and we thought before we actually even start the workshop to really break down these terminologies, and Michelle now is going to go through all of them and explain what they mean.
Okay, so the first terminology we thought to break down was what a greenhouse effect was. So in very simple terms, because the definition does tend to get over my head sometimes, but in very simple terms, the greenhouse effect refers to the trapping of the sun's warmth or heat in the atmosphere, right? And then that in turn causes global warming, and then we're going to look at what global warming is. You know what? Feel free to take out a pen and a paper and jot down some of these things. If we're going too fast, feel free to tell us in the group chat, hey, I didn't get that last definition. We're more than happy to stop. So the next definition is greenhouse gas. This is a gas that contributes to the greenhouse effect, which means this particular gas absorbs and traps energy from the sun. And this is trapped again in the Earth's atmosphere. And then we'll look at what a fossil fuel is. Some of us may have heard this term, but might not even know the proper definition for it. But again, simply put, this is a natural fuel, such as coal or gas. And a lot of the times, this is got from extracting it from the earth, and it comes from like things that are more than 1,000 years old, and that is what a fossil fuel is. Next is global warming. This is a slow increase in the Earth's average temperatures caused by the greenhouse effect, which means we will have increased levels of carbon dioxide and pollutants. So the CO2 is what carbon dioxide is, and then the pollutants is essentially agents that pollute. It could be our water, it could be the air we breathe, and so on and so forth. And then the next concept we're looking at is industrialization. This is also called as the Industrial Revolution. And this happened not more than 150 or so years ago. And the term industrialization simply refers to the development of industries in a country or region on a wide scale. So we look at the mining industry, the fishing industry, the farming industry. We could look at technology and cars. There was the invention of the steam engine, so the train that ran on coal, and all of that forms part of industrialization. And then we're going to see how this actually ties into our broader topic, which is what climate change is. And then last of our definitions is weather. And weather is the condition of the atmosphere at one particular point in time. This could describe how rainy, how cloudy, how windy a place is. Like today, the weather in Cape Town is quite warm. It was a bit cloudy, but it wasn't cold. It was quite warm because it was quite sunny as well. So this is the breakdown of some of the terminologies that you're going to be hearing throughout this workshop. If you'd like to take a note, if you're still taking a note, feel free to let us know so that we don't move forward and leave someone behind. I'm just going to give a minute for that.
I just had a question. These terminologies, is this what we're going to be taking in throughout the, I know you said that we will be touching on them, but the terminologies that are used today, are they the only ones that we're going to be touching on today? Or as we go through the workshop, will we also be learning other words?
So we are going to be coming across some new words to some, but this list is just the definitions that we've chosen to focus on just for now. And if there is a word that we feel might not be very familiar with all of us, we're going to try our best to break it down as well, like throughout the presentation. For instance, I could have said for instance, and I wouldn't know what for instance meant, so I would have to have someone break it down for me. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So am I right to assume that we have absorbed the terminology, mind the pun, and I am going to give it to Xoli.
Thank you, Michelle. So, I mean, most of us might not be aware, but in South Africa, like the climate is constantly mild, with an average daytime temperature around about 15 Celsius. And in winter, that's in winter, like it's 50 Celsius, and then around about 20 Celsius in summer. So even though like there are rapid increases in temperature that may occur when the wind blows from the desert or from the scorching hot summer, those are like our average weather. But there's been an increase by at least like 1.5 times more than the observed global average of like 0.65 Celsius in the past 50 years. So remember when Michelle explained the terminology of weather? So there's been an increase in our weather by 1.5 more. And this has added to extreme like rainfall, all these different events. But for now, we're going to focus on the rainfall events that have increased frequently. And now we're going to take just a few minutes to watch a video clip. And while you're watching this video clip, I'm gonna encourage you to come back to your breath. You know, like we have this thing that keeps us alive. and that really connects us to the environment. So I'm going to remind you to really be aware of your breath, and to ask yourself, like, what's happening, you know, on that clip, like what's spinning, and who's affected, and also, like, who are the missing voices, like who do you think is affected but we are not seeing. So I'll post those questions on the chat, and you are welcome to reflect, you know, some of those questions on the chat while you're watching, and then afterwards we're going to do a debrief. So I'm just going to ask everybody to really take a deep breath in. And as you breathe out, just really shaking it out, because I feel like that was a lot, you know, to take in. So I'm sure all of us have seen or have watched or have read, you know, about the frequent increase in floods happening in South Africa. And actually this video was taken on the 24th actually of February this year in Musina in Limpopo. So it's real, it's happening, you know. And now we're really going to look like why do we have these increased frequency in floods, and I mean, and other like numerous like natural disasters that are happening. So now we're really going to define what is, you know, climate change. So Michelle, can you move to the next slide? Thank you, Michelle. So, I mean, this is the basic definition that we came across and we wanted to share with you because, I mean, one of our intention is to really simplify, you know, this big thing called climate change. And I mean, it's defined as a change in weather condition over a long period of time, you know. So, for example, like in South Africa, I mean, we have a warm climate, as I have said before. And, you know, if you look at the southern and the eastern regions, like like Cape Town, the Eastern Cape, we, on an average, like we have the lowest temperatures, and that's due to the altitude, like we are surrounded by coast. And then the warmest areas are the areas like KZN, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and the interior of the Northern Cape. So the minimum and the maximum temperature all show high. They show like high extreme, and there's been like a lot of increase, you know, in frequency across those countries. Those regions. And so there's been summer heat waves increase, you know, and the annual temperature in the country is actually projected to increase up by 0.37. And so it's just simply, it's a process of our Earth getting warmer. So that it's increasing, it's getting warmer. And this process is normally a natural one, but since the industrialization, which Michelle explained before, us human beings have caused the process to occur at a faster rate. So we've created systems, you know, like burning coal and other things that Michelle is going to explain, that have like really like created like an increase. And the weather patterns will be more extreme, you know, and unpredictable. So summer, I mean, if you have noted, like the summers are becoming much hotter and the winters are becoming much harsher. You know, it's getting more cold in winter. So, I mean, that's really what is climate change. And if someone has questions or maybe want me to go over something over again, please put it down on the chat. As we said, that we are not in a hurry, like we are here to all learn and to really go back to the basics. And so if no one has questions, and now we can move on to the causes, like what really causes, you know, climate change. And Michelle is going to explain that.
So I'm going to start off with the question, and then feel free to maybe raise your hand or pop it into the chat, the group chat. This is essentially what the question is around. What really does cause climate change? Some of us have heard about climate change. We've spoken about how we've had gases trap heat from the sun into the atmosphere, and this was defined as the greenhouse effect when it started out earlier. So now we really want to know what is causing climate change. And I'm giving it to the floor. I'm giving it to you guys. What do you think causes climate change? Feel free to let us know in the chat. Annalisa and Otesh say greenhouse gases. Okay, that's one. Fossil fuels, that's another. Burning of fossil fuels, we've got pollution. big industry. Deforestation. What else do you think causes climate change? Or do you know causes climate change? Even the little things, or what we think to be the little things. Food wastage and landfill sites getting full. Just going to wait a few more moments in case someone else wants to share. Water pollution. There we go. Air pollution from Yola. Big fossil fuel industries who blame it all on people. We see this one way too often. So we also see some other big industries. We also see some other big industries like, I don't want to name names, but Coca-Cola is one big contributor. And I'm going to let you guys think on how they're contributing to the rapid change of our climate. Right, so for the purposes of this session, plastic pollution, thank you, Jared. Sarah Industries making too much products. There we go. So while everyone else thinks of more things that cause climate change, straw companies, plastic straw companies. While we wait on everyone else to write in other things that cause climate change, I want us to just think about, see what we've seen in the video. Let us not forget that. And then let's remember some of the terminologies like the greenhouse effect and the greenhouse gases, right? While we try to dissect what really does cause climate change, because the gases are not, escaping all by themselves. There we go, big factories and emissions. These are some of the ways in which the gases are escaping into the atmosphere, thereby being trapped there and trapping the heat from the sun, and then now we are battling climate change. Feel free to put something else in while we move on to the next slide. So we've chosen about 3 main ones that we just chose to focus on. Everything else is valid. Everything else is very, very important. And it's, in the end, it's all the little things that add to the big picture. And part of this big picture is like 3 big pieces that we're going to try and look at. And the first one is the burning of fossil fuels. I saw so many in the group chat. So earlier on, we mentioned industrialization, right? And we say this was the process where humans decided they could make things or they could extract fossil fuels from the earth, burn it, release all this gas, and then it landed in the atmosphere, and now we're stuck. So since that process more than 150 years ago, countries have been burning large amounts of oil, coal, and gas. And just to bring this down to more of like a reality check. The large amounts of oil, coal, and gas, these are also in the form of petrol, right? We'd see that a lot of humans use private cars. A lot of humans fly to different continents, to different provinces, and this is all fossil fuels being burned. We use coal in Cape Town, or in South Africa rather. We've got the Koelberg power station, and they burn coal, right? And then we've got the gas industry. So at home, we actually use a gas stove. This is just so it's more real, right? And countries far and wide have been burning large amounts of oil, coal, and gas. And these three are part of fossil fuels. These fuels are then, they release gases such as carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and the result is the greenhouse effect. Remember, we mentioned that the greenhouse effect was when gases were trapped in the Earth's atmosphere, and those gases that were trapped there then absorbed the heat that came from the sun, trapped it in the same breath, and caused Earth's temperatures to warm up. This is a cycle of how that the life cycle of a fossil fuel, right? So it's essentially a natural resource. It's extracted from the earth, or rather it was discovered first, and then they decided to extract it. But it first lives as a natural resource, unbothered, just sitting there. Someone discovered it and said, hey, we could burn this and make money, or we could burn this and make life easier. So they thought. They went on to extract it using heavy machinery. It was burnt and pollution happened. And this relates to air pollution, like we've seen. And this pollution goes into the air, and it's in the form of the gas that is trapped into the atmosphere. I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself a lot, but for me to understand something, I just really have to break it down and explain it to myself like 4 or 5 times just so it sticks in my head. So this is what burning fossil fuels does to our Earth. We burn it, and then the gases are instantly pollution, because then they travel into the Earth's atmosphere. They sit there because there's no escape. The sun shines, the gases trap the heat, and this heat has no way to escape. And so the result is the Earth warms up. This is also known as global warming, and we call this whole process of trapping gas and receiving heat from the sun, trapping it into the atmosphere, and warming up the Earth as the greenhouse effect, right? So this is how burning fossil fuels contributes to climate change. The next that we have is deforestation. And I wanted to think of forests as like the Earth's breathing supply, right? So in the same way that we use our lungs to breathe, or in the same way that buildings would use air conditioning systems to control how hot or cold that particular building is what I would like us to imagine forests as. And I think that allows us to also understand how important trees are, or how important forests are to the general well-being of the Earth. So here's how forests work. They absorb large amounts of carbon dioxide from the air and release oxygen back into the air. So these large amounts of carbon dioxide in a perfect world would be received from animals, from humans, from just about anything that occurs naturally, right? And it releases carbon dioxide. And then the system would have it that because trees produce large amounts of oxygen, so it's like a give and take relationship. It's given to the air and it cleans the air for us, takes the carbon dioxide away, because then the trees use it for photosynthesis and the food and everything else that happens in the tree that we're not going to touch on today. So that's how forests work. Again, I mentioned that we can think of them as like big air conditioners that limit climate change. Like the Amazon rainforest is the largest of them, but it's also being threatened with deforestation because, well, we are humans and this is what we do, right? But here's the real problem. We are cutting down way too many rainforests. And we're using this for wood, for paper. We are clearing out space. Well, we want to call it space, but we are cutting down forests to be able to get access to oil. We're building dams, we're building roads, we are urbanizing, for lack of a better term, these very vital parts of our Earth's functionality. So we cut it down. And then, as you can imagine, because forests absorb large amounts of carbon dioxide from the air, if we cut down forests, it means we break down a part of the Earth's mechanism to regulate itself, right? Because air conditioners essentially regulate the conditions in a particular room, in a particular building, in the car, in the bus, or whatever. So we can think of it like this. Our air conditioner doesn't work anymore, or part of it is broken. It means whatever heat is going to come from the air conditioners is only going to warm up a particular point and not the rest of the system that would have happened. So if we look at the image here, these trees are still going to be doing their job, right? But these trees that have been cut down, well, they don't have a job anymore, apart from being used for wood, for paper, for just to clear them out so we can put dams there, roads, and so on and so forth. And this disrupts the natural processes that regulate the Earth's temperature, which means where these forests would have been able to help cool down the Earth, they can't anymore because half of them are being cut down, which means now we are stuck and we are sitting with excess heat or too much heat that's coming from the sun, that's coming from all of our activities as people. And we have no way, or this part that's been cut down has no way of acting as the rest of the trees that still stand. Is it still making sense? Perfect. All right, so this is how deforestation is related to climate change. So in simple terms, we cut down trees, right? Trees can't make the earth cooler anymore, which means now we are sitting with excess heat. The heat causes the earth to warm up, and over time, the temperatures just keep rising and we just keep chopping down trees. And then the last of the three main causes of climate change that we wanted to look at was agriculture. Now, just looking at agriculture and what we've learned from school, what we know about it, it's simply the process of maybe farming animals and plants for food, etc., right? But the problem that we're sitting with right now is that animal and plant farming is releasing many different types of greenhouse gases into the air. And this is particularly problematic because the whole world is running a capitalistic agenda, meaning whatever is happening with the agricultural field or the agricultural industry is that whatever is going to be produced has to bring in some level of profit. So what does that lead to? It leads to exploitation of land. It leads to abuse of animals, and it also leads to the rapid production of such products that we then consume. And this is like a really big industry. It makes a lot of money, but at what cost? Okay. So animals are known to produce methane, which is 30 times more powerful than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. What this simply means is methane has 30 times more the ability to absorb and trap heat than carbon dioxide. And animals are known to produce methane. And animals are part of the agricultural sector that is being exploited. There is an overproduction of meat products simply because it brings in more profit. And this is how it then relates to climate change accelerating. And how does this then tie in with the plants? Well, we know that plants take in the carbon dioxide and they give us oxygen. So what harm could agriculture have? Well, the nitrous oxide used for fertilizers, this is a chemical, right, is 10 times worse and is nearly 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. This means it's much more dangerous than carbon dioxide, but it's also about 10 times worse. Like we just learned with methane, this is 30 times more powerful and worse than carbon dioxide. Nitrous oxide is 10 times worse. And us overproducing plant-based products in such a way where we use the existing agricultural norms means not only are we exploiting the land, but we are also, as humans, we are also simply speeding up climate change because of our practices, right? And that is how agriculture essentially contributes to climate change. I'm just gonna wait here if we've got any questions. So feel free to raise your hand or type in your question while I just do a bit of a recap, and then I will give it to Xoli and she'll be speaking to us about the effects of climate change. All right, so just bringing it back a little bit, we spoke about the burning of fossil fuels. Again, we've only chosen these three main ones because they're the main contributors to climate change. So burning fossil fuels, I hope you remember the cycle. We find fossil fuels in their natural form, which is the resources according to the chat. We extract, we burn, and then we pollute. All right. Deforestation, big air conditioners that we are breaking down, and then we are stuck with so much heat in the atmosphere that we don't actually know how to get rid of it because we're not trees. So the last bit being agriculture, both in the animal and plant farming sectors, and how this is very, very harmful, not the practice of agriculture itself, but the exploitation of resources such as land and animals to be able to profit off of it and feed the constant demand, because humans, we are naturally prone to consume things, or we've been conditioned that consumerism is good. So these are the three main things. I don't want to keep rambling on, but these are the main three causes of climate change that we have decided to focus on. I see there aren't any questions. So I am going to give it to Xoli, and she is going to be taking us through the effects of...
Thank you, Michelle. So because we have been listening a lot and really taking in all of this information, so now we're going to do something interactive. We're gonna put you guys into groups, and in your groups, we'll give you about 3 minutes to really, like, based on what you know, like, what are the effects of climate change? And so you're just gonna share honestly in your groups, and then when we come back, we are going to have a dialogue around that. Yeah. I'm thinking maybe we can have one person per group, maybe just to share some insights on your understanding on what are the effects of climate change.
Can my group go first?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I was in a group with Muketwa and Michelle, and Muketwa brought up some great points that I hadn't thought about. Actually, I mean, I think of pollution, but then I don't think about all the different types of pollution that are effects of climate change. So sometimes we always view it as a cause of climate change, but it also is an effect of climate change because of the social aspect. So pollution, air, and also waste management. Another mention was flooding and rising sea levels, as well as rapid weather changes. And when we say that, I mean, once, we don't really view South Africa as a place to get cyclones and things, but we've been getting them a lot more in recent decade. We also mentioned, and I'll stop after this one, so because I'm sure other people have also mentioned things. We mentioned water insecurity and how that affects especially people in communities that are under-resourced. So that's definitely aspect of it. And lastly, sorry, before I pass on to whoever's next, we mentioned that an effect of climate change that we don't often think about is the guilt and the blame game that gets played. Too often do big fossil fuel companies blame community members in under-resourced and poorer communities for the effects of climate change, when in fact they're just trying to avert attention from themselves onto people, especially people who happen to be Black and brown people. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Because of time, I'm really not gonna comment. So can somebody from the next group please share?
Can I go next? Okay, cool. Oh, sorry.
Hi everyone. So the effects of climate change, we came up with rising of sea levels, natural disasters that include drought and floods, heat temperatures, and food shortage. So now I'm going to hand over to Atesh to explain more. So these effects of climate change affect our social and ecological rights. Animals are at risk, and when there is water pollution, the water is dirty. So when we drink it, we have sicknesses like diarrhea or cholera. So it affects our social rights. So that's basically it. Our group is made up of me, Annalisa, and Sigaye too. Thank you.
Thank you, girls. And I will hear from, I think, the last group. Okay.
Okay, then I guess that would be me. So I was in a group with Michelle and Sarah, and the points that we basically touched on was um, the weather changes that we've experienced in South Africa, like over our lifetimes, and the fact that seasons are longer, weather is more unpredictable, hot days are getting hotter, cold days are getting colder, um, stuff like that. Then we also spoke about the displacement that people are facing due to climate related natural disasters such as flood and even drought. Um, we touched on how food is actually getting harder to grow because farmers are no longer able to accurately predict the weather as they would previously. We spoke about a decrease in biodiversity and plant and animal life, and yeah, that in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you, Sai. I mean, I think Atesh summed it up very nicely. Where it's really not about ecological rights, like things like drought and sea level rise and wind and other storms, but there's also social, rights that often we don't hear about. Things like nutrition, vulnerable areas, like animals being displaced, our health, you know, high food prices. I mean, I track, I don't know, I've got a thing where I really track food prices, and it's been so interesting how many things like basic food like rice, maize, tin stuff have just like the prices have hiked like drastically. And of course, I mean, that's probably because of low crops and many places like farms being really affected by climate change.
Thank you so much to everyone who joined in on this workshop. Thank you for literally going right back to the basics with us. We absolutely appreciate it, and we appreciate you. We hope that you're going to continue going back to basics with us over the next few workshops. Thank you so much.